Uh, that was clearly my fault. Andrea had nothing to do with it. So in the interest of time, I think we're going to start the session. You ready? Very good. Thank you very much for being here. I have the honor and distinct pleasure to introduce our speakers today. They've both told me to keep it relatively short, which I disregarded to a certain extent, because I do want to give you a sense of exactly what they've done so far, why they're here, and what the talk might actually be all about. Maybe, yes. So I'm going to start with Professor Jerry Cupchik. Of course, Jerry is a dear friend and colleague of mine. I've known him for over 20 years. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what he's been up to the last few years. So he received his PhD in social psychology from the University of Wisconsin under the supervision of Howard Leventhal. After that, he did his postdoctoral fellowship at University of Toronto with, of course, Daniel Berlyne. It's not the only reason we're friends, okay? So he's been a professor at the university since 1999 at the full professor status. His awards and distinctions are many, but I'm going to cover a few of them just so you know. He's been awarded the Gustav Theodor Fechner Award from IAEA, the Arnhem Award from APA's Division 10. In terms of distinctions, he was president of IAEA and APA's Division 10 and the International Society for the Empirical Study of Literature. He's been a very busy person. He's been an invited speaker in lots of different locations. He's been to China, India, Japan, Netherlands, Germany, UK, Israel, France, Hungary, and most importantly, Palma, Mallorca. Now, for those of us who love empirical aesthetics, he's of course done lots of different things, but Jerry is primarily known for the incredible amount of work he's done trying to elucidate the relationship between emotions and aesthetic experiences. So he's the kind of person that you can sit next to and he can sort of distinguish between the subtle effects of mood versus affect versus emotion versus feelings. He actually knows what the distinctions are. I have no idea, but every time I get confused, he's the person I go to. So he published this really, really fantastic book that came out in 2016 called The Aesthetics of Emotion. And this to me is sort of the go-to book if you are interested in the relationship between aesthetics and emotion. The references alone are amazing. And Marcus knows all about that because he too loves classic books. And Jerry actually has read everything that he cites, which is really amazing. Now, aside from doing all this work on emotion, he's also done other work. So he's published on the themes of intuition, language, poetry, imagination, architecture and design, awe and the sublime, self-realization, fantasy, mind-wandering, melodrama, memory, interest, pleasure, to name a few. This is not even really everything. And I think the reason why he's been so prolific and so productive in the course of his career is that he's essentially collaborative in nature, okay? And most of what he's done, especially in the last 20 years since he and I have been really good close friends and colleagues, is finding really interesting people, sometimes a little outside of our primary domain of work, with whom collaborations can be very, very fruitful because they bring new ideas into the fore, which is what brings me to Andrea. So I have a little bio to read here for you for Andrea Carraro. So Andrea Carraro is a cultural operator with 7 years of experience in the field of contemporary art as an artist and as a curator, as well as 10 years of experience in the digital business with skills in 3D modeling, image editing, digital art restoration, public relations, and content developing. Carraro Lab has won 10 international awards for digital culture in Europe and the US, and has participated in the birth and success of several innovative startups. From the iPad immersive app presented by Steve Jobs to the first mass experience of virtual reality during Expo 2015 in Milan, Carraro Lab develops innovating platforms, technologies, and content in the most advanced sectors of digital media. So, as you can see, it's a marriage made in heaven, okay? I'm very glad to... Strong language, yes. So, without further ado, it's a pleasure to have you both. It was an honor to introduce you, and the stage is yours.
Technical knowledge first and make it work.
Thank you, Andrea.
Since I am a digital author, I will start the slide for Gerald.
Now I packed the jacket. I was a good boy. Now I can take it off and perform. It was a conversation. Should I take it or not? Okay. I have to stand in front of the mic and be a good boy. This is what we're going to do. Now, usually, keynote speakers suck up all the space. I'm very lucky. I'm a professor for 50 years, more than that. I've had the privilege of working with the most wonderful students around the world who've trained me. I don't train them. It's just an opportunity for conversation, as you will see. I was Dan Berlyne's postdoc from 1972 to 74, and I've been teaching at the University of Toronto ever since. He died in 1976. Let's see if I can master the little button. What would Daniel Berlyne have to say about the new stimulus world of VR? And Carraro Lab is Italian primo in this area. And so, as a point that I want to make is that I never work alone. I work in collaboration. Andrea and I met each other 3 years ago through a mutual friend in Israel, and I also work with Stefania Ballone from the Teatro alla Scala di Milano. These are all conversations where they permit me to have fun, and we work together. Now I will take you on a kind of magical mystery tour. Then I will turn it over to Andrea, and then we'll answer your question. Believe me, he knows more than me. So the point is this. What would Daniel Berlyne have to say about the new stimulus world of VR and AI? We'll put the AI on the shelf because it would take this 2 hours, and I wouldn't know enough to tell you. But what I want to do is I want you to begin by thinking about your teachers who have shaped you in your life, because that's really what this is about. This is a play in 5 acts. Each act has its own themes. They have certain qualities and certain features, but let's begin with yourself. Who has shaped you? Who have been the important scholars in your life? If you go, you take a picture of the screen, you will go to a website I have at the University of Toronto where you can read the interview with him, 350 pages, but they're kind of short, which gives you a sense for, no, but it's quick, with corrections, hand corrections. Who are these people? How are they real? What are they real? Because they're quasi-heroes. He was one of the 5 founders of IAEA in 1965. I went with him as a postdoc because I proposed certain kind of studies. That's a different kind of conversation. And then we worked together in a collaborative way. He was a very, very gracious individual. So 3 years in the, just a little bit of background, just quick, 3 years in the Army till 1946, but he had something of a strong feeling for traveling, the meaning of traveling, develops an interest in art in Italy, returns to Cambridge after the war. People had a sense for lost time. That's why I want you to think of the biography of your life. He's a hero in this world. When I gave a lecture on him 30 years ago, whatever it was, there were people crying who knew him. So you don't have to cry, but you can find the foundations of your own being in this lecture. Not because of me, but because of yourself. As an undergraduate, he had a choice, modern languages or psychology. He spoke 10. He picked Dutch up on the boat, if one can imagine it. And I have unending other stories that I can amuse you with. But he said, it was one of the worst weeks I've ever gone through to decide in Cambridge, do I continue in languages or switch to psychology? He gets a 1953 PhD from Yale. He spent time with Neil Miller. Always listen, these are important lessons. Think about yourself. Think about your own creativity. Forget us. Think about you. You always have to have an experiment at the back of your mind when you're talking about a theoretical issue. Or you look for an experiment out at the back of your mind. Where are you now in your work? Like, I mean, for real, okay? He was described himself as an autodidact. I hadn't heard of the word. He was more influenced by writers than by teachers from his youngest ages. He was an itinerant scholar. We think of our heroes as suddenly manifesting in a place and they grow and everybody worships them. Forget it. It's not real. Berkeley, NIMH in Washington, Piaget in Geneva, translated Piaget's book on intelligence into English, Boston College. And when people say, well, what about your career? What about your career? Think about yourselves. Think about myself. Don't they realize that you don't have all that much choice? So it's not as if the boy was sitting there and I'm glowing and I'm so wonderful. I speak all these languages. I've written these 4 books. They all want me. It was not real. Gets a job at the University of Toronto in 1960. I was his postdoc from 72 to 74. Died of cancer in 76. Responded to his correspondence that morning. See? He was a special guy. Now, here are the things I take away, because I'm building a certain kind of edifice to set things up for Andrea. because we've had conversations over the last 3 years. Some people you can work with, some people you can't. Everything that we do collaboratively is always in an open-ended way. So Berlyne was a kind of romantic. He did lab rat work was glamorous. Always get away to scientific study of problems that matter, problems that Freud was dealing with. So he was reading about Freud when he was a kid. But he had a romantic view of methodology, a romantic view of rat questions. Look what he says, ask the right questions. If I can give you any advice in this lecture, that's the advice. Sees the pendulum swinging back toward integration. We say we cannot build up models or theories in psychology without neurophysiology. This is the 1960s. See? So we're always trying to build links. I want to argue against the isolation in our laboratories, in our illusions, in our egos. Break it. We need a common language that the whole of psychology can fit into. A common set of concepts is essential. Now, when I was this postdoc, I was 24, I was a hippie, big hair, big beard, if one can imagine it. It was the 70s, we had no choice. We're walking around the University of Toronto campus, and you heard undergraduates talking about their theories that were as important as any others. See that? The respect he had for children, fundamental. Get past the illusions of self. Look what he says. Now, I'm putting certain constructs on the table that Andrea is going to pick up because we're going to write a book together. We're building a bridge from psychology over to virtual reality with the Carraro lab. How do we, even this morning we were trying to, where do we build the bridge? It's always open-ended. I live a life that's open-ended with no fear. As my mother said, a fool loves his own thoughts. I live in that world, okay? So look at this, and you guys know this if you know anything about Berlyne. Interest in a striving for novelty is affected by attention to the stimulus and the motivational effects of feeling. That's where he was in the 50s, 60s. See, we are of that era, and then I will surprise you by jumping back. You'll see. Curiosity reveals an active impulse to seek out new sensations, experiences, and knowledge. And then he made an important distinction that's relevant to my work with Ocean on instrumental and expressive modes of thinking and imagination with fMRI. Specific exploration by curiosity functions to reduce uncertainty through the gathering of information, very purposive, like a hunter. But then we have diversity exploration, which is the foundation of IAEA, associated with the pleasure that results from moderate increments in arousal. So that's the two themes. Are you looking for information, a purpose in everyday life, or do you want to be overcome with experience? And then he went on, the principles which govern an organism's encounter with the environment can be extended to the domain of aesthetics. That's how the boy made the transition. If you read the interview, and just take a glance, like who cares? Just go there and take a sniff. You'll see the life of a successful guy. It gets past the romance of it to a real person struggling. He had 4 one-year appointments. His first real job was at my university. Now, Ramon Lully, it's because of Andrea. Andrea said Ramon Lul, and Enrique corrects my pronunciation, which I'm sure is still in error. 1232 to 1316, remember the ancestry, and I mean business here. First of all, the thing that he shared in common with Berlyne, they traveled a lot. He came to Majorca. Ramon Lul first highlights the intention of creating an instrument to reason without appealing to authority. So that's a post-scholasticism. I teach history of psychology. He shall clearly explain the text to the students through reasoning without an appeal to authority, and the students should read through the text and put questions they have to the teacher. This is Majorca, 800 years ago. Can we not learn lessons from the ancestry? Because all that matters here is humility in the end. See? But the ultimate sense of his teaching is illustrated in his recommendation. The teacher shall propose questions to the students and solve them by providing reasons according to the process of this art. For without reasoning, the artist cannot make it work. Is this not what we try to do in our work? Put a structure of logic together for our what we call our hypotheses, our anticipations. And here we should note that art has 3 friends: intellectual subtlety, skill in reasoning, and good intentions. For without these, no one can learn. See the point? This guy's 800 years ago. We're so smart. We have methodology. We have richness versus precision. We're living in the world of precision. Are we different from him? No. Can we learn humility from him? Yes. And I turn to Juan Luis Vives, who I encountered by accident in the library, who's, I would consider the first social psychologist. With humanism as a movement in the 16th century, we begin to see a gradual shift away from religiously tinged views. His parents were burned in the Inquisition. A modern approach involves grounding emotional experiences in situational contingencies. If you look at my work and you go to ResearchGate, you'll find all the papers. You can download the book for free. Don't tell Cambridge. See, because they are capitalists. Cupchik is sharing. I don't care. It's too late to, don't delude yourself that you're going to make a cent from what you do. The business people aside, of course. Okay? He was a master of descriptive kind of observation and analysis. Here's the point. Fundamental to my method, fundamental to my interaction with Andrea, is taking a look at real events in the real world that are our instructors. Not our theories, not our words, not our delusions, not our egos, but real people in real life, in real domains from whom we can learn. See, it's not important for us to know what the soul is, but to know its operations and manifestations. This marks a transition to a humanist and secular view. 1492 to 1540, see? These guys laid the foundation here in Spain, in Mallorca, on the mainland, Valencia, for the foundations of who we are and what we do. Learned from the forefathers and foremothers. So, and Vives anticipated the modern age, writing about homelessness. Look when he's writing. Okay? Education of women. Takes a diplomatic anti-war stance. He appreciated the problematic nature of introspection, maintained that it's very difficult to investigate the human mind, since above our mind we have no other than we can observe. Can we not learn from these guys? I found this by accident. It changed my life. Not it changed my life because of the new ideas. It changed my life because I found my soul. I found my foundation in the previous scholars to whom we dedicate ourselves. Look what he writes about emotions. Emotions reflect how people give meaning to their worlds. Emotions are pictures of our individual pictures of reality. Huh? 1540. Humility. See, and then he lent depth and subtlety to each of these with little example. I'll read only one. We feel more compassion when instead of the expected good, an unexpected evil occurs, as when the heir to a kingdom falls into captivity in prison. What does he do? He works from example. That's the whole point here. He's working from example. Can we not say that in our methodology, and I've done this, I wanted to do when I was 16 years old, I'm lucky to have gotten the job. Everything's luck. I'll be all around, we're so smart, forget it. We're just lucky to have survived. Because look at the person who came in second that didn't get the job. That applies to the students who got into their programs and the professors who trained them. Now, Ram Hare. I stuck in, we redid this yesterday a little bit at the end when we did some reconciliation. Ram Hare, a British philosopher of science, came to talk to a wonderful group that Berlyne had organized, and he said something that I didn't understand. Only two things matter, conversation and neuroscience. Now, neuroscience is what I live with Ocean. And we have conversation about the measures. But what is conversation? Conversation is me talking with Andrea this morning over breakfast about how we build a bridge between virtual reality and the little things that Cupchik knows over here. Because he knows his world. I don't. I'm not teaching, big the age different, huh? But I'm not teaching him. He's teaching me. So that's why I add one thing. When we go to Bishop Nicholas of Causa, the doctrine of humility, the only way we can begin to learn is to know how little we understand. And I've been a professor for 50 years. I've never had more fun. Why? It's not about little Jerry Cupchik. It's about people like Andrea and other people who come into my life. Now, Act 2. Are we called? Act 2. And I'm going to sneak over here. Don't leave the microphone, they said. But I looked at the water with jealousy. Why should he have one and Cupchik doesn't have one? And I'm sensitive to time. If I steal all this time, he'll murder me for less. The family in Italy, don't mess with it. But they live in the north, different narrative. I don't mean to be racist, okay? So what's changed over 40,000 years? So if you're looking for concepts to put in your pocket and drag around in your pocket, put this one in your pocket. Prehistory. I'm going to deal with the analog and the digital mind, the instrumental and the expressive, which Ocean and I are exploring together. Action leaves its marks. The instrumental mind used tools to survive. The expressive mind left drawings on cave walls. If you go to my book, download the book, like I read, it's like somebody else wrote it. It's like, wow, that guy knew something. Read the chapter on cave art, like, wow, I learned stuff. It's fun. The analog mind. Now, take this and play with this in terms of what, like, well, you'll do whatever you want. What do I care? It's your life. I'm having a good time. They asked me here, okay? And Andrea and I get to play. But the analog and the digital mind, actions are felt. It's holistic and organic. There are layers of experience. They are layers of meaning. Do you see the course that comes? It's our personal histories. It's our actions and gestures, our expressions in the world. Then along comes the cognitive revolution. The old brain of taste, touch, and smell gives way to the new logical brain. The analog mind turns into the digital mind. This is not a joke, huh? This is the children in our class who are stuck in their cell phones. This attentional space has shrunk down to 2 seconds so we can barely give a lecture in ourselves and in others. There's an ethical foundation here. And now, if you go to YouTube and you find the medium is the matrix, my research assistant Clara did the most beautiful TEDx lecture. The head turns, there's poetry. So she selected some slides for me. We couldn't animate them. But the TEDx lecture, The Medium is the Matrix, is my wonderful research student Clara and her wonderful skills. But look what happens with the modern digital mind. Sets me up for him. Compartmentalized and mechanistic, more concerned with outcome than with meaning, not constrained by personal history, acts in the present in accordance with transient needs for information or emotions, can reach in any direction without a respect for hierarchy, unencumbered by traditional values. Come on, that ain't nothing. Analog over here, baby, and digital over here. Winners and losers. How much have we lost of our souls? I know as an empiricist to use the word soul is enough to send me directly to hell. But I have friends there. V-Face is already there. He's waiting. Cupchik. We were waiting for you for years. Finally, they gave me the passport to get here. So what's the price that we pay? The boundary between the self and big data becomes more porous. The tracks we leave behind can come back to haunt us. The self becomes more diffuse. The self becomes more manipulated. Is this not a reality that we face? Is this not a reality that our students face in our classrooms or that we face ourselves? That every transmission we think has gone off into the world, but yet is recorded and come back to haunt us. Another act. Now I teach history of psychology, I live in the world of history, and I'm not discussing any of my research here. I love my numbers. I love it. I love the situations that we can create that are ecologically valid, that mean things from real life, and I invite you all, as members of IAEA, and we had 135 people in my meeting in 1994, and I was there at 72. I cannot be happier for the guys and the successes and Enrique and the whole team to have 200 people here and young people engaged. But I say to you, as the advice of the quasi-aged, I ain't retiring, I'm having a good time. In one hand, you hold the world, phenomena that you observe in real life. And the other hand, you put the lenses of method. Kurt Danziger, 98 years old, my mentor now, most senior living historian of psychology in the world, we meet on a regular basis, permitted. Method is not ontologically neutral. We must be aware of ourselves, the romance of numbers, the romance of methodology, my incredibly brilliant colleagues with all their precision, and perhaps the banality of constructs, the richness versus precision. So what do? I turn to these guys. These are my heroes. Schiller and Goethe, of course. Emerging, look what happens as a foundation to where I'm going to talk and to set it up for Andrea. Emerging self-awareness, intuition of becoming, uncertainty and tension are essential in the struggle toward a unified self. Resonate to the experience of others in meaningful situations. Is this not a foundation for the resurrection of our discipline? Against the narrowness of methodology, the illusion of facticity, the illusion of words. Berlyne said he became an empiricist in the 74 book because he was studying languages and he felt it was too soft. But if we go back and we study the scholars of languages and literary criticism, we found substance in the interpretation of text, which we can learn as lessons. And I just go through it quickly. Baudelaire, Age of Discontinuity. This is all the setup for our world of the digital mind. The digital mind, this is the setup of the digital mind. The digital mind ain't new, folks. 1800s, the digital mind. Favored the spectacle of modern urban life, the cult of images, romanticized the fragmentation of modern society. Each of these is the basis for a lecture. The fragmentation of the self. Ooh, that's juicy. See the point? This is the romance of the awakening of the self. Theory of the leisure class, conspicuous consumption, Thorsten Veblen. I add conspicuous leisure that people depict in their Facebook, in their isolation from themselves and the centers of being. Coolly, quickly, the looking glass self, how are we seen by others, individual and society are separable. And look at this, 1935 Arnheim, who came to Berlyne's lab to lecture, who refused to evaluate me for tenure because I was of the evil empiricist. He was kind, and then published with me later. As Martindale said, are you crazy? We get Arnheim in as our, you look at your CV later, you'll drool, not to speak of the books that you have in the library. He spoke of 1935 cultural transportation. The wide world enters our room. The individual is a lonesome consumer of spectacles. Illusion that perceiving is equal to knowing and understanding. Did the boy smell the implication of television? 1935. I'm awakening us to the history of those who preceded us and the history that set up our empiricism. Cultural industry, Adorno, mechanical reproduction enables mass distribution and consumption. Hidden image messages favor conformity, diminished critical reflection about life and media. Is this not the sin of our existence? Is this not what we have to deal with ourselves and our children and our students and our surrounding world? And again, Guy Debord, society of the spectacle, commodities complete the colonization of social life. Isn't that sexy? Colonization of social life. Being into having into merely appearing. Authentic life is replaced with this representation. People need to be self-conscious of their situations. I'll put all this whole lecture on my website, the university, you can find it. But come on, look at these guys. They're putting some cards on the table. Lonely crowd, Theodore Reisman. Identity with what others believe and consume, want to be loved rather than esteemed. Autonomy and self-knowledge are compromised. Do you smell Facebook hiding in here? When did he write this? 1967. And then Marshall McLuhan, my friends came to the University of Toronto to make pilgrimages to this guy, and my students never heard of him. So never delude ourselves that anyone cares about us. If they never heard about him, and he was like a deity, he used to come to Berlyne's lab. And you know what he said to me? Little hippie with the hair and the beard. Cupchik, this methodology is not going to get you what you want. Is that a basis for self-doubt or what? But you know, you got a job, you keep going. New media have personal and social consequences. They can gather into us the messages that change the scale or pace. None of this existed that we live in now. When he was there, we could not imagine what we live in now, or else I'd be a billionaire and own the building. Electricity made things instant, time and space collapsed. And I love this Playboy magazine reference just for the impurity of it. The central purpose of all my work is to convey this message. By understanding media as they control us, we gain a measure of control over our lives. So the bottom line is to understand the media. And here I'm going to probably transition. Yeah, all right, fine, it's good, perfect. Go back. The age of electronic transmission replaced the age of mechanical reproduction. Walter Benjamin. How do people address and redress the imbalance between passive recipients of mass media products? To what extent are people aware of the ways that mass media manipulate themselves, the transient moments of engagement, and the feelings that accompany them have a long-term impact? And I wrote, if I'm responded to, therefore I am. So what am I doing here? I got the modern Christ. Yeah, it's all cute, more cute, fine. It's all cute. Saving the self. How does the cognitive digital mind reconnect with the embodied analog mind? Huh? How do we discover the essential self, the layered self? How do we avoid becoming dopamine reward addicts? We face it. We're addicted to our phones. I'm in China giving a lecture, and the big guy who's introduced me, he's stuck into his phone. Why? Because that's how you escape China. No offense meant. I'm very close to my colleagues there. It's real for us. How do we take ownership of our lives? We want to be aware of the facts and situations of our private lives, the social and technological worlds that surround us. Unifying ourselves, slow down and resonate with others. Explore the layers of our personal histories, which is why I presented the scholars. They are my history. They are our history. They are the legitimacy and the ethical foundation of what we do. They are our awakening. Explore the situations around us as a foundation to our methodology. What do we see in our world? What phenomena manifest? Value our experiences. Imagine ourselves 10 years into the future. A fine line separates us from the machine world. Machines are not organic. There's no blood feelings or emotional history. They just store information. They control us without our awareness, but machines are not conscious. Now I transition to Andrea. Now you see, what happens here for me is that in this dialogue, these guys are serious heavy hitters. They're not crapping around. This boy is his daddy's slave and the twin brothers. I've been there. I've interviewed them. You can find that on YouTube also. But in the dialogue across the generations, where he has the knowledge and is teaching me, is foundational. So now, Andrea, your turn. One suffering gives way to another.
Yep.
And then you can ask us questions. Mostly him. He knows nothing.
No. He's trying to run away from questions. No, I'm kidding. And thank you, Gerald. And I can't stress more or enough the importance of my friendship with Gerald. Not only because we understand each other completely, but because for me it's a huge resource. And that's the way I am here and the relationship I have with this kind of situation. Because for me is a moment to understand, to get feedbacks, and to actually survive, because we, as a small company in Italy, we need to survive at big tech in the virtual reality world. How do we do that? We decide to take a complete different route from them, and we decide that ethics and an ethical approach is a resource for us. It's the only way we can survive. And as Gerald said before briefly, I am Andrea Carraro. The company is Carraro Lab. It's a family company. And yeah, I work with my father and his twin brother. They look identical. It's not easy. You can...
And they're not lightweights.
No. And to make you understand the nature of our company, none of them studied digital in the digital field, and I didn't. My uncle is a theoretical philosopher, and my father was a painter. He was in the Biennale of Venezia when he was 21, and he decided it wasn't a good thing to do, and he just dropped it. He's crazy. He's crazy. And but why am I telling you this? Because for us, understanding aesthetics, it's essential to survive. Why? Because we work in the humanities. We are digital humanists, as the terms goes, and our way to survive is to try to understand as much as we can from the study of aesthetics. And that's the main reason why I'm here. And we have all of our crazy things. We have our practical approaches to media and to aesthetics. And these approaches are essential for us to survive, to function as a company in the strange little world in which we work, which is in culture with digital means. It's really small, actually. And what we do is to try and find novel ways to understand and work in new media. For example, we have this type of approach. It's mainly from my father, this one. And it's based on our way to develop content in the new technologies. And that's what we have experimented. In our opinion, and it's only a practical posture, this one, especially in medieval Europe, we had this transition at a certain point, and we call it the transition to the frame. And actually, this happens both in aesthetics and in knowledge. You have the book, the icon, and the painting that is, they are burning in the same moment, kind of. And you have this framing of knowledge, of aesthetics. And everything works in this framing. And the person is in front of this frame, and his relationship, or her relationship with the artwork, is being in front of the artwork, or being under the artwork in orthodox icons and watching up. And then, you know, it doesn't end there. When photography comes in history, you have the daguerrotipo, of course, which is a little, but then it gets to the frame, and then you have video, films. It's in the frame. It's a framed media. You have this projection, which is framed. This laptop is framed. The television is framed. My smartphone is framed. So we have this kind of, framing of the picture that somewhat, somehow it governs our way, our relationship with media. And for us, it's really essential because that's how we work. That's how we project. That's how we create, design our work. And then this comes in the picture, okay? The sphere. So now we have to design worlds, new media worlds, that they don't work like this. To survive, we need to find new ways. Where do we look? What do we do? Storytelling, for example, storyboards. We can't do that anymore. We can't tell people, look this, then look there, then look there, then look up, look down. We can't do that. So in order to survive, we need to understand and find new ways to function. And where should we look? We should go back. So I kind of lied to you because art wasn't framed always, but actually, arguably, it was an immersive type of experience. So for us, this is already a virtual reality space, but I will push that aside. We don't have time to say that. But surely, this is an immersive multimedia place that is probably a work of art. I say it's art. And what was the relationship of people there? They were walking around. It's multimedia. Why? Because there was the painting, there was the lighting, the sound was different. Probably the anthropological relationship were different inside here. It was a completely different, immersive place, and it was a substitution to the real world. So here, you have something that functions as a virtual reality space. And that's where we are trying to understand and learn and find new ways to make it work in a normal way. So yeah, we work in the digital field, but we thrive on this kind of material to understand how to design virtual reality immersive places. But actually, this kept going. I'm sticking only with European art, okay, European history, but as you well know, immersive places are everywhere. This is Villa Livia. It's conserved in Rome. It's a beautiful museum near to Termini Station. It's a must. You enter here. When I entered here the first time, I felt as if I was walking inside a competitor. I was like, oh my God, this is so immersive. It's yes, thank God they're dead. Sorry, but and it's a second style Pompeian painting, wall painting, fresco, and as you can see, it used to be completely immersive. Can you imagine living like this in a house where you enter into a virtual reality immersive space? And this is, as you can see, it's very photorealistic somehow. And it's amazing because it makes you reflect. Okay, so these people functioned and worked there. What was the relationship with the artwork? How is it useful for me as a digital author to understand how it was meaningful for these people? And this is an everyday life space, kind of. But in the moment where the book and the icon and the painting were seeing their first life in history, you had this type of art, okay? This is Ravennate Mosaico. And as you can see, for us, this is a virtual reality space. And surely, this is an immersive work of art that works in an immersive way. You do not have a storytelling here. You do not have a linear storytelling here. You have freedom of movement. And so how do you tell a story with freedom of movement? Actually, the Latins, as the Europeans were called in the Middle Ages, had a term for this, Biblia Pauperum, the Bible of the poor. Why the poor? Because the poor is illiterate. The poor cannot read. The poor cannot function in a linear storytelling. So what do I do? I create immersive places that tell the story of the Bible. And that's what this thing is. It's a media that convey meaning, and we are studying this to understand how we can understand and convey meaning in an immersive place, in virtual reality. Here we go. I mean, one of the most famous places on Earth, the Cappella Sistina, the Sistine Chapel. And this is surely an immersive place, okay? There's nothing to discuss. The walls are painted, the rooftop is painted, the sound is different, the temperature changes, the light is different, it's multimedia, light, sculpture, architecture, painting, I mean, light design, sound design, everything is different. It's really an immersive multimedia space. And we believe it's a virtual reality by its own. But look at this. Here you have frames. You have little frames. Little, yeah, like this. If Michelangelo hears me. But they work together, not in a linear way. They are in continuous relationship. There is a narration. There is a narration. And we have a term for it. We call it space telling. It's not storytelling. It's space telling. How do you design space telling? That's our obsession. That's how we stay alive. And that's what we do. This is an example. That's my father. And for example, we do a lot of virtual reconstruction for archaeology. This is a painted rooftop in ceiling, painted ceiling in Bellinzona in Switzerland. And we have recreated, it's completely destroyed. We have only the tiles. We have recreated all of it with archaeologists and with the historians. And people can look at it. But hey, why should they stop and look at it from the pavement? So we make them fly. They fly, they get near to it. And we found different narrations that were created by the authors of this ceiling. And we have created systems in which the recipient can go around and look at them and evaluate this type of storytelling. So this is all about rethinking the relationship of the recipient with the immersive space. And we strongly believe we have to start from the beginning. We have to start and understand and value these places as virtual reality places and learn how to convey meaning from them. So we have a lot of different ways to understand and a lot of different resources. I'm not going to tell you all of them, otherwise we are done. But I stick with theater. So one of our projects, it's a crazy project. Of course, I'm the project manager. It's about dissemination of new technologies in theater. And there are big hitters there. For example, we'll get to the example later. But what we do is to learn from them, from theater, how performative acts can somehow convey meaning in a space. But look at this. This is one of the earlier example of theater, as we know it, Teatro all'Italiana, which was born in Italy. But as you can see, what's the relationship between the artwork and the recipient? It's the relationship you're having right now with me. It's frontal, it's not immersive, and it's framed. Look at this, it's framed. So, this does not work. Thankfully, one of our collaborators is Eugenio Barba, which is arguably the most famous theater director alive. He's 83, but he's still kicking. And what did he do? With this work in the 60s, he broke the stage. He said, nah, theater is something different. Theater in the world has been and is something different. He founded anthropological theater. He learned from other cultures. He brought the audience in the stage and he destroyed the stage. So he created different strategies to design the experience, and they are immersive strategies. And here you have people that are, for example, in circle, and this is the most natural form that happens when something happens for Eugenio Barba, which is a huge theorist as well. And also he created, for example, Spazio Fiume, where the actors are in a line and people are on the other side. So he distributes people. There are objects in the space. And for example, there are actors that are behind objects and they move the attention with sound. So what I learned from Eugenio Barba, and Berlyne kind of speaks about this, it's the relationship between curiosity, trying to understand curiosity. And for me, Eugenio Barba is designing curiosity in the space. What I'm trying to do is to design curiosity in order to tell a story, to convey a meaning. But also, this means, in the ethical part, to somewhat foresee emotion. So what type of emotion could a person feel in a certain moment, in a certain place, in a certain sector of my virtual reality immersive space? So I'm closing because I'm already too late. For example, right now we are working as well in education, and we have developed several platforms in education that works with virtual reality, augmented reality, extended reality. And this is a practical example. For example, you have an immersive classroom, but it's very frontal, like this. I'll be very quick. Or you use the virtual reality glasses, goggles, and everyone has an individual experience in which they turn around, they look around, and they explore the place. And as you can see, the classroom is the same, but it's the relationship that the people have with the media that changes. Or then you use augmented reality. And what do? You move the audience. You don't redesign the space. You move the audience. And you put the augmented reality object in the middle of the classroom in order for them to see it and to experience it in the best way, okay? But everything has to do also with ethics, has to do with respect, because here we are manipulating the presence of a person. That is something that no one is talking about in our sector. That is why we believe that virtual reality must be an aesthetic experience, not an everyday experience. It must be an aesthetic experience. These are laboratories, little labs, 1 hour maximum per day, maximum. That is why we stick with aesthetics. That is why we thrive here. And that is why our competitors look to the everyday life and control, in my opinion. And those are special thanks. Thank you very much.
Great, it's working. So I think we have some time for questions, in case there are any. Very good.
I have a question for Andrea. So your research is obviously about specializing environment and, in a way, knowledge. I'm wondering if you have any prospect on how you can sort of revolutionize and use that technology to share knowledge more efficiently.
So it's a question that has many answers, actually. For me, okay, if we speak about virtual reality, okay, we are speaking about understanding the relationship of a person with the environment. The environment must become an educational platform. So you must understand how to convey meaning inside the place. It's about spatiality, and also it's about the relationship that the person has. You have to, it's an intuition where the person is going to watch, to look. How do I make it interesting? If I can, if I may, I have an example. One of the examples we use is the Palace of Memory of Cicero. So Cicero, for example, created a virtual world, a virtual reality in his mind, in which he imagined a palace. The palace had different architectural styles, and he would walk in the palace, and that walk was his discourse in the Senate. He was one of the most important, maybe the most important lawyer of the late Republic. What do we do? Because this memotechnica is used and used and used again, and it's successful. We study Cicero. What does Cicero say? We have to change the architecture. It must be meaningful. It must be coherent. There must be coherence between objects and the space that has them. But another thing that Cicero says, they must be shocking. More shock. You see these objects and you're shocked, and that makes you remember them. And that we are thinking about that. How can we shock people without being unpolite? Or how can we, yeah, we know Italians can be loud, so we need to. And so, so it's all about, trying to understand how we can create a place that is shocking, that then you think again about this place, and you are like, and how can you design this walk, okay? And it's very performative. And you have to have somehow, you have to foresee somehow how the people will go and feel this place. So this is an example that is very interesting. Try to find the Palace of Memory, which is really super interesting.
So much easier when he gets the question.
Yeah, you see.
Yeah, sorry. So I would have a question for you, actually. I mean, yeah. Okay, so in Act 1, you said that the real events in the real world are our instructors. And when training AI, the real world, like arguably you could say that the real world is the instructor of AI. So what are your thoughts on how can we be instructed and maybe even inspired by AI in turn?
I think that I would begin with the word fearful. Fearful of AI, because our students, I'll march over there. Okay. I'll delicately move over there. First of all, we're all living in fear because our students are using AI to make their papers. And we cannot pass it through at the University of Toronto an ethics review form to say the kid is a cheater. So we're all living it. So the way I think about it, and I'm not really an expert in AI, I'd have to bring a student of mine who lives in that world. But fundamental to me in my work, and I can go into microanalysis, is having real situations from one's life that one preserves as an object which we want to understand. That's underlying our aesthetics, our social psychology, real, and we observe the world around us. When we move to artificial intelligence, Andrea points out that it's essential in their work in virtual reality to preserve the aesthetic. I talked about the shift from the analog mind to the digital mind. So it's a different mode of engagement with the world. It's a more abstracted mode. It's a more selected mode. And the question I would ask, a kind of answer to your question, but not ideal, is how much alienation is there in the process of artificial intelligence, where information is selected in the most careful way, in the most dense way, but in the act of selecting that information, which is almost shocking in its totality, Andrea showed me a new program this morning that it knows more than one can fathom, but can we preserve a real world of emotional relationships in the world of artificial intelligence? So we have the richness versus precision trade-off. Precision in this case becomes the minutiae of details. I'm wondering if we lose our souls in the process. I mean, it's something I face with my students. We all face it in our research. The machine knows more than us. The machine could give this lecture. So what are we losing there? Well, we're losing relationship, we're losing meaning, we're losing the plasticity of time, we're losing space that opens up and closes in, we're losing a sense for causality. My point being, in the presence of detailed information, we're losing the framing of life. And in that sense, we're in a kind of dialectic between the two of us. That wasn't bad, that was close.
Well, I would put a veto on your claim that a machine could give this lecture, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Yeah, you have two minutes left to torture the speakers.
Yes, so I think we have time for one more question. Maybe Guido?
Boy, Ocean gets some exercise out of this. And a relay.
Hi,
Look at
thank
this.
you for this talk. Mine is more of a comment than a question, so I'm behind the thing. It's like you mentioned, you made a reference to modern theater as the one place where sort of those, you know, sort of the walk from the, or like the transition from the 2 to the 3-dimensional has already happened. And it just made me think that in some ways that notion, like there's an assumption there from both of your perspectives that both virtual reality but also modern theater ultimately deal with representations of reality. But if you look at the sort of art history of those particular practices, then they've long turned on themselves already, you know? So modern theater is no longer interested in representations of reality. And so from that point of view, I would say there's a third sort of way of thinking about how all this will go. I mean, I hear sort of yours is more of a sort of pessimistic and the other is more a positive view of how it might happen. But there's a third one in which both AI or virtual realities and augmented realities will just turn on themselves just as all other art forms and media have previously, like the book, like photography, like film, like theater, and will simply become, you know, abstract and start dealing with themselves as individual media and art forms in themselves. And they will never really, they will stop being interested in representing the live or the representational and the reality. And that's kind of, I guess, historically, that's what happened to other media before. So I feel, yeah, there's kind of a third thing that might happen that sort of, I think is also quite likely in a way.
So, Ocean will kill me. It's going to be a long answer. No, I'm kidding. I'm trying to take it short. So,
One final comment, if I'm permitted.
of course. So, one thing I learned when I studied theater to understand it better, to present it with solutions that didn't take its nature from it, was that the first person that used the term virtual reality was Artaud. In the book, it's theater and it's double. Okay, so I was shocked, but it makes sense, and I believe the relationship between virtual reality and theater and performance in general must be aligned with the concept of presence. It's all about manipulating the presence of someone, and here is where the ethical part stays. And I would like, afterwards we can talk together because we have no time. I'll try to stop. On the other part of the question, because there were at least 2 questions, all of them very interesting. What happened to painting when photography was invented? Some argued, now painting is going to die. No, painting became even more important. It became something completely different. And that's what's going to happen, okay? I am not concerned with, for example, prompt-to-image programs that I use, for example, and my father, who's a painter, uses. I'm not concerned. Why? Because fine arts will change completely, will adapt. I do not believe they are going to die. Absolutely not. They are going to change, adapt, become something different, as it happened with photography. And artificial intelligence will be probably, most probably, a victim of the same process. I completely agree with you. Let's give it some time. We need to understand the medium, but let's give it some time, because when a new medium comes, another changes. It doesn't die, it changes. Or it blends. Thank you.
Let me sneak one. I see the clock, 12:02.
Yeah.
I see. Shut up. Well, I just want to make one point. Look what we did today. See? We have a dialogue between Jerry, who's been a professor for like who can imagine how many years, and Andrea, who's a very serious person with the company, and it's fundamentally a dialogue. See? We discussed it this morning. We set the thing up. It worked, and I'm quite happy with, you guys have your reality. I'm happy with how it worked. Why? Because this is the foundation for ongoing dialogue between us as we work toward a book. I just want to make one point to you guys, because we are in a tradition where we apprentice to more senior people. He is not my apprentice. We are on an equal playing field. He knows his world. Jerry knows his world reaching back in time, but we have an opportunity for a dialogue, which shows the value of my mother's notion of a fool loves his own thoughts, meaning Don't be scared to take the risk. Because we tried an experiment here. It can work, it cannot work. But we've always understood each other in our conversations going back 3 years. I recommend this to you, to take the risk, to observe real events in the world as a foundation for what you do. And there's a whole discussion of not getting trapped in measures as if they were real, an ontological trap. Be careful. Don't forget the humanities, because in that world they actually engage with real cultural phenomena, but we must always be in dialectic, in a dialogue, between the psychologist and the pragmatician, between the experienced researcher and the innocent person. Take the risk and don't be scared of the adults. Thank you.
Thank you very much.